It's nice to see everyone. It's been a while. I hope everyone's enjoying their summer break. This is a special board meeting of July 27th, 2023. We'll have a special presentation presented by SiteLogic and also Piper Sandler and possibly NAZ's input as well, perhaps.
Yes.
With that, let's start the Pledge of Allegiance. Actually, one second. Pledge of Allegiance. Vicente, would you please keep it on?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Neil.
Second.
Thank you, Rebecca. All in favor?
Aye.
Are we gonna slide Tim over?
Maybe any comments from the public?
It's also Tim's team, Jen, Rich, just so you know. There'll be 3 of them.
Okay. Thank you. And Blake, now I'll turn it over to you for introductions.
Right. So we are excited today to be able to share, just real quick, sorry, I'm here. Do we have other members of the Piper Sandler team on?
I'm here, Blake. This is Tim, and
Okay.
also my colleague Jin Kim.
Okay. Hi, Jen. So we're lucky, happy today to be able to present. I know for those board members that were here at the last meeting, we did do a sort of an overview, more than an overview. We got into a little bit of the details here about a potential solar project and some associated funding, for that project or financing for that project. Had some time over the last month or so to really dive into it. Also, we'll be able to sort of give a refresh where we're at so that we're all sort of operating from the same foundation moving forward. So we're joined today, our team from SiteLogic. Thank you all for being here today. We also have Tim Carty and Jen from Piper Sandler, our financial advisors, who have been really instrumental over the last month in trying to support us through financing or potential financing for the project. And then we're also joined by our NAZ team. So we will kick it off. I think, Nick, are you gonna kick it off?
Yes, I am.
All right, Nick, welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Got my microphone on here.
Will you be able to pull up?
Thank you very much for having us. It's good to be back. And Rebecca and Roger, it's good to meet you guys this go around. For some of you, this presentation will be a little familiar. We are going to take a deeper dive on the financials, on the cash flow. Joanne, I know you were looking forward to taking a closer look at that, so we'll be covering that. I'm Nick Eddy. I'm your account executive with SiteLogic, and I'll be handling everything business related, contractual, and also relational. So I'll be your first point of contact throughout the project.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Brown. I'm a senior director at SiteLogic, really focused on early program development all the way through construction implementation and post-construction services, kind of overseeing various entities within SiteLogic, making sure we're delivering the project that we've promised you today.
Do you guys want me to go to the mic?
So they can hear you for the recording.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lincoln Trainer. I'm a project development manager with SiteLogic. I'm actually your local rep in terms of our engineering team. I'm just a 20-minute drive away from you guys, so you'll be the one I see if you ever need somebody out on site to look things over.
And my name is Sarah Kennedy. I'm going to be the account executive for the energy management program that comes along with all the projects that we do here at SiteLogic.
Thank you. Okay, there's a little bit of lag on the remote here, so bear with me on that. So our agenda today, we're going to discuss the process what's led us up to this point. We're going to review the project scope, the program financials, the cash flow, and the summit, the financials, meaning the cost and the savings, as well as a detailed pro forma review. We'll discuss all the benefits to the district, and then finally the next steps. Does this look good to everybody? Great. Okay, our process today. So we started, Dr. Silvers called me about the NIM 2 tariff rates. They were changing to NIM 3. And we got in contact through King Consulting, who you guys work closely with now, and who is a partner of ours. We work with them strategically on grant funding and helping find modernization dollars, state matching modernization dollars. So they're one of our partners, and they recommended us to Dr. Silvers. Dr. Silvers reached out, and we got the district grandfathered at the NIM 2.0 tariff rate. That was our first real big win as a team. So that equates to about 20% additional savings on the project, roughly about $4 million. So that was our first big win. From there, we developed the project. We did the designs and the engineering, and we brought out our subs. We walked multiple subs at all the sites, and received all their information and all their bids. We then put our final scoping and all of our pricing together, which we delivered to your team, to NAZ, to Noemi and Dr. Silvers, as well as to Tim Carty and the Piper Sandler team, who we had brought in, who actually the district brought in to really fine tune this and to make sure that this is a winning project for the district, which it certainly is. So we have had one other district update meeting, or excuse me, one other board update meeting, and so this is our second go at it. And for some of you, it'll be the first, so looking forward to it. Any questions about the process up to this point? Okay, great. So I am going to try to save as much time to really take a deep dive into the cash flow. So I might be a little bit more, I want to be efficient with our time, and I want to make sure that we're covering everything that Roger and Rebecca that you might have missed. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I might go through this at a higher level this go around. So as you can see, we have the 5 sites here. That'll be your column one. Second column will be your solar size in kW. The third is your total annual production per kW at each site. The next column is your offset, and that is really going to be determined primarily by your real estate, by the space that was available for these solar arrays at each one of the sites. We try to maximize that based on the space that was available. The second to last column is going to be your solar savings. It's important to note that is based off today's utility rates. So this particular column is 22-23 rates. So that's how we came up with that calculation. And then the final column is going to be your solar plus the battery storage plus your energy storage. And that's the annual savings per year.
Before you leave, when you say district office, is that including Da Vinci?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so in other parts of the presentation, you say district office, Da Vinci, so we should always figure that's what that means.
Yes.
Oh,
Good.
That's the whole site here.
Yes, it is.
Does it include the gymnasium or just this building?
Gymnasium is in terms of aquatics.
It's just parking lots. We're focusing on.
But the utility offset does not include the aquatics. That's separately metered and not in the scope of work here.
So it would include the gymnasium though, right? The gymnasium, so the meter is only a portion of the gymnasium that is separated out, that includes as a support for the aquatic center, but the gymnasium would still be covered.
The whole facility was taken into consideration, but I will point out again that we only were able to offset the production by 65% because of the limited real estate and the parking lot. So we maximized the array size based on our what was available for the confinement.
So I think to be just completely accurate, I think that it covers this entire site except the meter that covers the
Yes.
El Segundo.
Correct. That is correct.
Right.
Hey,
Which would, sorry.
No, sorry, the other, when you were finishing this, going through the columns, you said something about annual savings.
Yeah, so your annual savings is listed in both columns, the second to last and the last columns. So those are your average annual savings per site.
Over what period of time?
That's
1 year.
Over 1 year, and that's based on today's.
1 year,
Utility rates.
meaning like the first year it's installed, or every year we use it, or what?
Yeah, it would.
So we'll get into subsequent years when we get further into the presentation, look at the cash flow. But this would be what we call a year zero analysis. This
Okay.
is if it appeared today and performed for 12 months, that would be the savings under today's rates.
And this would assume that the project is completed and online.
Yes. One more question.
Yes,
sir.
Because I remembered, I don't think I saw this in the last presentation. What is our total bill annually?
That is a very good point.
I
And,
don't remember at the top of my head.
and we had a sheet between us and you're gonna have to look it up again.
I'll look.
We'll get back to you and we could even toss it and put it up on the screen.
Sorry, one more question, just so that I'm sure that I understand. So column, the very last column is the second to last column plus the battery savings, so it's not,
That's right.
it's not 232 plus 263, it's 263 minus the 232 is the
It's
battery.
just the
Okay.
battery contribution. Right.
Okay,
So it's the solar in addition with the battery.
got it, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Just so I'm clear, on the district office, the limiting factor is the size of the array that we can place here.
The space available.
The demand. Because
Correct.
we have Further offset for the 35%.
Correct.
Correct.
It's just the size that we can fit, i.e. if we have more land or another space or a roof or something like that, then that can increase. The
Yes.
limiting factor, got it.
Yes, that is correct.
They're gonna go into
Okay.
details.
Okay, so you actually led me right into the next slide, so that's perfect timing. So the district office, Da Vinci, so the total solar size, 826 kilowatts. Battery power is 120 with a rated capacity of 258. Annual production kilowatts is 1.2 million. The offset of this particular site, which is going to be the least offset of all your sites, is at 65%. We did have another array that was located on this back section here, which jumped it up to about 75%. But there's a fence line in the property line that we were encroaching on, and we have to be outside of 20 feet of that encroachment line. So we had to do away with that array. There was no way to place it there and economically for it to make sense.
So that spotlight was kind of jumping around. So we're talking about the parking lane, basically right along Douglas, along the main street there.
No, the one in the back,
No,
The one in the back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
adjacent to the
over
pool,
there.
Got it. Okay.
right there,
Yeah, yeah.
very top.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, this thing's very sensitive. Yeah.
Nick, I recollect that you didn't, if I remember right, you did not look at the parking lot where the aquatic center is. So,
Perfect. So we actually did look at that space as well, and it was determined, I believe, is this shared parking with, or was there?
That's the aquatic.
That was the aquatic center.
So we own the parking spot. I think you weren't sure last time. We own it. However, El Segundo primarily uses it.
And it's not so much, my understanding is the district has ultimate control over that parking lot. The challenge is it's a little bit of solar for a long run, and your dollar per watt to install it is very high, and it's, to be honest, not worth
Okay.
not worth it for the savings that additional production would yield. And so that's why we avoided that spot.
Okay.
Great. And so your solar savings annually at this site is 232,000. With the battery storage, with the energy storage, it would be 263, about 264 rounding up. The EV chargers, so we put 2 dual port chargers at every site. So there's going to be equity across the district at each site. So essentially you're going to have 4 chargers available at every school site. And yes, and good point. Thank you, Noemi. We're also going to be running conduit for EV capable spaces or future installations. Should there be any code changes that requires more, also the ability to create more revenue to the district by the community and school students and staff charging, using that as a charge point and paying for that energy.
How do those work? Is that on a pay for use process?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, so it would have to be. But yes, it would. People would pay essentially with a credit card. Now there are ways to limit who is using it and what times they're operable, and the district will have control of that. They can determine that.
So at each charger, there's a point of sale. And so either it's a credit card or a RFID card or a barcode that maybe the user has with the system. But the setting up of availability, when is the charger on, when it's off, that's all owner defined. The district could define, when would these chargers be available, for how long, and then for what rate will it be available for? And you could set those in really hour intervals. What we want to do for the district and as a part of our monitoring and operation is kind of own that for you and report out that we've identified, we're tracking the current rate, and it'll change, the utility will change the rate on us. What we want to make sure is that we've charged more than the current rate so that it is a revenue source, and you'll see it in the pro forma that we have a column for EV revenue.
Is it like an app that people use to manage that?
It is. So there'll be a dashboard for the district or hopefully for us to manage it on behalf of the district. And then for the public, there's an app that you could, put your phone up against the point of sale. It'll unlock it. You'll continue to charge. It'll keep track how long you're charging, and then you'll unplug and reset the plug, if you will. And that session would be over. It'll collect the funds from the person using it, and then monthly it'll deposit or send a check to the district, and that would be the revenue. Again, setting it so that we're not giving away free charging, and that we're tracking the utility rate on. We suspect a monthly basis would be acceptable enough, but we'll get into operation and maintenance and the real time observation that we could do with solar and EV charging and the battery.
Just a quick question. When you reviewed the as-built, when you put these diagrams together, because it came to my attention just a day or so ago from Vicente that there may be conduits already run for solar across the middle islands in the parking lot. Was that taken into consideration?
It was not. We didn't determine or identify that there were.
Okay.
Obviously, if there's that's a benefit to the district, benefit to us, because we're already in the ground. The fact of the matter, we're going to have to open the ground to run the power for the solar anyway. And so hopefully we don't disturb it and we can take advantage of that work that's already been done.
Okay, cool.
Great. And so you can see the placement of the EV chargers, which is in close proximity to the main entrance for DaVinci here. The battery storage is, we have placed it here. However, I know there was some discussion about this being a muster point for emergencies. We do have some flexibility in the placement, but for now, this is where we placed it.
There's no emissions from the batteries?
There isn't any emissions, no. So there's sealed batteries, and so no emissions.
What's the size of the battery roughly?
So it's probably about 2 parking stalls. Once you do some setbacks and bollards, we're looking at 2 parking stalls.
And they're locked in some sort of vault?
They are self-contained. In fact, the Division of State Architect in February put out new guidelines that everyone's adjusting to. And we'll be able to meet those based on the batteries that we're recommending. And it's fire suppression, self-contained, and again, bollards around to protect it from vehicle strikes.
Are there special rules for school installations?
There is. So the Division of State Architect put out special rules. Some of it has to do with placement to an exit. You have to be so far from an exit. You have to be so far from the property line. And again, through final engineering, we'll be able to meet all of those requirements.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the DO and DaVinci here? Okay, I'll move on to the next site.
Just as you're doing that, one comment they made last time was why not the roofs? You want to quickly address that, because that may, that's an obvious question.
You want me to take a step?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're the roof guy.
So by installing solar on the roofs, that would trigger a full DSA review. And by doing these carport shade structures, that's an over-the-counter pre-check. So it creates more of a streamlined approval process. It also reduces the cost and the timeline for installation of these projects. So we really want to avoid the roofs whenever we can. In addition to that, penetrations on any roof is an opportunity for leaks in the building. And so we generally do not want to put solar on the roofs of schools.
We have a history of never having any leaks. So
Could I go back?
That gets that one.
Yeah. One more? Okay, so we show a total production of 2.8 million. The district uses 3.7 million kilowatt hours. That's a third column, just going back to an earlier question.
So I think part of the question was what's
The
the,
cost.
is the cost?
Oh.
What's the bill?
909,000 is how much you guys spent last year and annually across all 5 sites.
You know, I know you've made a projection based on increasing cost. Have we calculated, or is there any expectation of increase in demand? I don't know that we know that, but for example, we're gonna offset, what the total offset is, I don't know what percent, 70, 80%, something like that. Is demand likely to dramatically increase or change such that the offset is significantly lower in the future, or the reverse?
And I think that's a fair question. A lot of that depends on probably enrollment and ADA and that sort of thing, as well as usage of the buildings by either the community or the school itself. But you guys do have plans for a number of energy efficiency measures throughout the school district, things like building controls, lighting through your bond project. And so that'll actually also reduce your carbon footprint and your utility demand as well.
The new construction now also would add.
New construction.
Yeah. So just hadn't hit you before, but.
The lights, particularly on
Right.
on that particular site, assuming we do lights. The other thing I was gonna share too, Neil, and I don't know, we need to quantify this but in talking, about energy efficiency, we also want to take a look at some of the practices that we have in the policies and practices that we have with use, refrigerator use, microwave use, coffee maker use in individual classrooms and at school sites, because that came back as one of a concern as we were looking at this. So we want to look at that too.
I have to imagine our air conditioners are also massive drain. And I think we were replacing them with plant, and that should have an impact. So all of these are part of the equation.
But for the most part, you're replacing with energy efficient, so that technically it should reduce it.
Same or better.
Same or better. Exactly.
Yeah, there's infrastructure upgrades and improvements, and then there's also behavioral. And Sarah will touch on that a little bit when she speaks. Yeah, are we set?
This is the next one.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so Weisburn Middle, we have the solar KW is at 416. The battery power and capacity is 122.58. Your annual production is 653,000. Offset at this site is actually 95%. So we had plenty of space here in the parking lot to work with. The solar savings annually is 128,000 with battery. It's up to 149,000. Again, 2 level 2 EV chargers, dual ports serving 4 parking places, with the installation of additional EV capable spots. Any questions on this site? You can see the placement of the battery storage and the EV charging there. They're both highlighted. Any questions on this site?
So Nick, the solar savings is what will be generated, assuming the same level of usage and the efficiency of the panels.
Correct.
The difference from the 128 and the 149, that is
With battery.
pending on usage from the EV station. So if people don't use it, then that's not going to get
No,
generated.
that's assuming current usage today. And
Today's
so really that's,
station, that's a solar battery.
Solar back.
That's a battery.
It's a
it
storage.
it is, so that,
Storage. Yeah.
I think it's $21,000 of additional utility cost avoidance or savings is attributed to just the battery. And that's really demand reduction, being able to cut the peaks of your loads throughout the on-peak period. And so we'll be able to charge the battery with the solar and then discharge the battery as we're approaching, and it's all happening real time. Exactly.
I got it.
So that is outside of the actual the charging stations. That's in addition to, so that's additional revenue that the district would be able to collect.
One question I have is the annual production of the solar panels. Do we see a loss of that over time?
We do, and we've modeled that into the ongoing year-over-year performance that we'll get to.
Okay, great.
All right, Delaire. So your solar size is at 266 kW, battery powering capacity 122.58. Your annual production is about 400,000. The offset at this site is 96%. Solar savings annually 81,000, 81.5. Your solar with battery is about 98,000 annually. Again, 2 level 2 EV dual port chargers and the EV capable spaces.
Is that battery storage on the playground?
It's shown there. The truth of the matter is we could move it around within means. What we're trying to demonstrate is it has to be close to the meter.
Okay.
The meter is located actually in the building. And that the enclosure that's right next to the playground is an emergency generator that my understanding may or may not work. We'll incorporate it or remove it. If we remove it, we would like to put the battery in that enclosure.
Because I would like to avoid putting it on.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the battery storage locations are right now, the battery has to go through a full DSA review, whereas solar is pre-check over the counter. So it's going to be a different evaluation process. So DSA is going to have some say on that placement. So the solar is where you see it, that's where it's going. The battery might be moved based on the DSA review and based on what we come up with as a team. So just know that solar is good, battery might be moved around slightly based on.
Avoid playground spaces and the front of the school.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Excuse me, are there any noise associated with the batteries?
There is noise. It's along the lines of an air conditioner. Because there is an air conditioner attached to the battery, it needs to cool the cells. It is, yes.
It would not be disruptive to student learning or to the learning environment, provided they're not standing right next to the battery storage.
So the enclosure doesn't have any insulation in that way for noise insulation?
No, there is noise insulation because it's confined. It is in
It is in a self-contained unit and there is insulation. But the fact of the matter, you want airflow, and so that's an entry point or an exit point for noise, if you will.
So in that location that Rebecca just pointed out, it's a playground, but literally across the street, you have residential. So I think that's the only thing. We have to take those in. Take those items into consideration.
Got it.
Well, and rodents and all those sort, there's a lot of, we have raccoons and, like everybody, right? Squirrels and so on. So obviously these are protected, these enclosures are protected from that sort of stuff.
They're locked. Again, they're locked and it's, a complete cabinet, much like an electrical cabinet. It's secure.
Okay.
There's padlocks on
There's
it.
some sort of venting then for,
There is up high, there's venting. It's nothing someone could crawl into. It's narrow and long across the top.
Holly Glenn, 216 kW, the battery power and capacity 122.58. Your annual production is at 338 kilowatts. Offset at this site is 84%. Solar savings annually 77,000, almost 78,000. With battery, it's at 92.5. And again, 2 dual port EV chargers. And any questions about the placements here?
Trying to orient my head in space. This is where my kids go to school, so like, which side of the street am I on? I guess my question is about since we've been talking about like the battery storage placements, it's like, possibly moving or whatever, if it's not possible to put them close to the big, like what would happen to the project, I guess, if we decided like a particular site couldn't handle the battery storage?
If one option is to go into the parking lot and lose spaces. That's what we're trying to avoid. We suspect parking is at a premium here. But that's always an option. A lot of districts put it out under the shade structure. And so that's always an option, and that would be kind of in line. What we want to do is kind of put the battery in line with the meter, where the utility is coming in and where the solar is.
But you need the battery when you have the solar.
You do not need it. It's not, you could just do a solar at some of the sites. So maybe a battery falls out and it doesn't get it. We think there's probably enough available space and options that we could bring back to the district. And we'll be able to identify one that's, within the best practices of battery placement.
Yeah, the solar can exist without the batteries, with batteries add an added savings to the district, an added factor.
And to that point, the batteries become valuable when the solar is not producing.
Exactly.
What capacity do the batteries have such that they would, if there is no solar production, super cloudy day, rainy day, whatever.
Well, it really comes down to how much power you're using. So cloudy, rainy day, you're likely not using air conditioning. Right? You'll probably you have to ventilate. You're running the fans at least. Computer rooms and the high density rooms, you're obviously running air conditioning. So it really depends. What we have is a 2-hour battery, and but it's not 2 hours of the site. It's 2 hours of 120 kW. And really, we size the batteries to maximize the economic return, not so much to,
Covers for a week.
yeah, exactly.
Are the batteries kind of like a UPS where it automatically kicks over to the battery usage?
It's not, so the batteries aren't serving as a microgrid. In other words, they're not emergency power. They're strictly designed for that economic dispatch. We're dispatching power to really beat the utility at their game, right? And save the district money. A UPS, the idea is you lose power and you could discharge that UPS, you preserve your IT infrastructure enough time to shut down. These batteries are not operating in a dark mode or black start, if you will. They're really focused on identifying economic return and saving the district money.
So is it possible during the day that the power, even if it is a nice sunny day, would alternate between the batteries and the solar cells?
Yeah, definitely. And so the solar will operate as the sun shines, right? And we'll take as much power as that's going to produce. We're going to feed the site, we're going to feed the battery. And because we're under NEM 2.0, we're able to, feed it back to the grid and get full retail rate from the utility. And so there's some belts and suspenders here. It's a very robust system, but you're absolutely right. If it's a shiny day, electrons will go where they're used. So either to the site, to the classrooms, offices, or to the battery. Once the battery's full, then it'll go to the grid and we'll get full retail credit.
So what's the assumption in your numbers then of battery usage versus, solar power without the batteries? And is there some sort of rule of thumb that you use for these calculations?
There's not. There's actually we use a third-party software, and it really looks at 15-minute interval data. So we use your historical data. We overlaid solar production over a year, and so that gives us a new kind of demand curve for the site. And then we discharge the battery to maintain a minimum demand to reduce those charges.
And that accounts for the aging of the cells and the aging of the batteries.
It does. So the analysis is a year zero analysis. And then as we proceed through the years, we're introducing a rate of degradation on the panels and on the batteries year over year, to a point where for the batteries, we have to actually replace the battery cells. And that's taken into account, again, not at year zero,
No.
but subsequent years after that.
And they'll cover that as part of the pro forma. All of that has been accounted for.
When we get to it, I'm really curious about the systems that are used to monitor and that sort of thing, but go ahead.
Okay, Aviation Elementary, solar size is 151 kW. The battery power and capacity 122.58. Annual production 227 kW. The offset at this site is 76%. Again, that was due to space limitation. Your solar savings at this site is 46,000. With battery, it's 61,000. Your EV chargers, 2 dual ports with additional EV capable slots.
So that's interesting where the batteries are on this site. It seems to be the farthest away unless I'm not looking at it right.
It is the farthest. I mean, it's far from solar, but it's very close to the meter.
Aha.
So all the solar power is coming back to the meter. The utility wants you to connect the solar really at the meter. And then we're connecting the battery right there. So it's again, in line between meter and solar is where we're setting the battery. And in this case, it's likely gonna take up some parking space. Again, we can move it around. Maybe there's space in the yard, you know, it looks like there's an industrial yard. Again, siting the battery, we're gonna have to work with staff as we go through final design and get through our initial DSA review meeting.
Okay, so now to the fun part. Joanne, I know you were looking forward to this. So here are the program financials. So the implementation value, our cost for this project is 14.8 million. The solar PV generation savings, that would be over 30 years, is 46.3 million to the district. The 30-year battery storage savings is 6.2. EV charging revenue, we've estimated that at 852 based on the number of spaces. That doesn't take into consideration additional EV spots that you might install or cars on the road. We're going to see a large amount of diesel fuel, gas fueled vehicles being replaced with EV. So that demand will certainly go up. And then we have the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. We call it a rebate. It's actually a direct payment to the school district. And that occurs after the first year, or in the first year after the system is put online. So if we are completing construction and we are online by the end of 2024, you would see it on the next code cycle, the next year, which would be 2025.
Is that a district-wide? District-wide, right? So we have to install everything.
Yeah, well, yeah, we intend to have kind of phased construction, but we intend to have everything completed and online by before 2025. The reason being is that with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's never been more money than there is right now for solar. It's great. And the only caveat to that is that if there were a change in administration at the federal level, that could evaporate, that and most likely will if there's a change in administration. So most districts who are in the same position as you are really moving towards the finish line to get these rolling as quickly as they can to ensure the construction is completed and the system is online before 2025.
Nick, just looking at that list there, I noticed the total saving is 44.2. So that's taking into account the project implementation value? Is that how that number was? I'm trying to figure out where 44.2 came to, because it looks like you add all the savings, it's not much higher than that. You have 46.3, but I'm guessing I just didn't do the math.
Yeah, so that also is going to have to take into consideration debt service. So your financing and also some soft and hard cost fees. But yeah, so you'll have to take it and I'm going to get to that in the cash flow. I'm going to walk you guys through exactly how we arrived at those numbers.
So it's not a math problem, is what you're saying?
No, yeah, it's not. So the 30-year program savings, 51.1 million, 30-year program costs is, and this would include your debt service, is roughly $18 million. So the net savings to the district over the 30 years is $33.1 million.
That is a math problem.
That is a simple one though, right? So so your average annual net savings to the district year over year is $259,000. And you'll see how that's spread out over the term of the contract when we get to the cash flow. But
Yeah, I think this overly simplifies.
I'm struggling to reconcile those two numbers, like you lost me.
Which
44 and 33. 44.2 is the total savings, but 33.1 is the total savings. So
The net savings.
the net savings. So that's after that 30-year program cost. That is the debt service. So that's the sum of the payments that you'll make on the tax exempt municipal lease. And so the 30-year program savings.
there's the interest that you're paying the bank for the.
what is the, I'm sorry.
11 million. 11.1 million would be the debt service.
There is some number missing between.
What's 44.2 and what's 33.1? If you could just, because I'm totally not getting
Tell you what, let's jump to the cash flow.
Yes.
Don't go anywhere. So when you talk about the net savings, remember that $3.9 million that was on the previous chart? is that amortized over the length of the implementation, or where's that money shown?
So, well, we actually show that you want to speak to that, because that's, we probably should dive into the cash flow, because a lot of the questions you're asking
Okay, all right.
is really presented there. So I'll dive right into it. But you want to speak to how we address the IRA?
So the IRA, and again, the direct payment or rebate is treated as a prepayment to the loan. So it's accounted for. It's not going back to the general fund, but it's going to the contribution of paying down the loan. It does not have to do that, and we'll want to talk to Tim and bring Tim into the conversation to talk about pros and cons of doing that.
It's a principal payment to the loan in the way you've done it.
It is.
To bring the debt service down and generate additional savings, annual savings.
Well, yes and no, unless the value of that $3.9 million is more to do something else with it. It depends on the interest rate for your debt service and a lot of other things, right?
Exactly. So if it's higher, then yes, we're figuring $3.9 million in rebate from the IRS under the IRA program. But it could be higher. We suspect that maybe one site that we haven't accounted for may have a higher rebate amount. And so that's
Actually, it's two, because two of the sites are in the disadvantaged community.
no, one site's already accounted for.
Oh, gotcha, okay, gotcha. So, yeah, there are two sites that are in disadvantaged communities that they would potentially qualify for an additional 10% of the total project costs. So that number could actually increase, and most likely will, based on those two schools that are within the SB 535 disadvantaged communities. Okay.
But do you have, yes, I was gonna say, you have the full printout in front of you.
We
It's
can
hard
see
to
this so
read.
well.
I can't, and I'm wearing glasses.
Okay, so column one here is going to be your fiscal year. So we'll move right over to column two. So that's your solar generation. Here you're going to see the total KW, which is going to be district wide. This again reflects the 30-year life cycle of the equipment. So your panels are going to have a 30-year expected life cycle. We do account for a 0.5% degradation year over year on that solar. The annual production has been modeled through Helioscope, which is our programming and what we use in our designs. And it does take into consideration seasonal weather and atmospheric dates, shading, and basically all the site conditions. And that's how we arrive to the total KW at each site. That'll be your column, what I'm calling column one, solar PV.
Solar PV, if I look at your fiscal year 24-25, there's an assumption there that that's like being installed midway through, so that's why the lower
So
production.
we're absolutely right. So we call that construction period production. Some sites are going to finish up before the larger sites based on phasing and early discussions with the district. Some sites won't become available until the summer. Otherwise, some of the smaller sites we could get in, build it, turn it on, start producing power, start earning that cost avoidance, if you will. And so that's why that first year is a fraction, maybe 8/12 of the total. It's 60%, I think. And then the following year, everything's online. We get a full year of production, and then we go from there.
Okay, so let's look at the fiscal year 25-26. That's really kind of like your base, right?
And that is year one, correct?
Year one.
All systems are online and and operational, and you're getting full savings district wide.
So the way I'm reading this is we're generating about 2.8 kilowatts per hour, right?
Correct.
On an annual basis.
Correct.
Utility cost avoidance about 671. That's with excluding the battery.
Yeah, that would be just your solar and you can see that here. I wanted to, if you don't mind, I'd love to just go through each column and then we can come back and review it, but feel free to
do the
jump
same
in.
thing, but go.
Yeah, feel free to jump in at any time though. So for the column 2, that is gonna be your solar, that's gonna be your savings or your utility cost of it, avoidance.
Okay.
And that was, we've come up with these numbers using Energy Toolbase. And this assumes a 6% utility escalation rate, which was the average for SCE over the last 23 years. That's very conservative. Oh, many years have been quite a bit more than that, sometimes in the double digits. So 6% is a very conservative escalation rate, which we've used for both the solar and the battery. So moving to the next column, I'm going to try to move quickly here, but if you have any questions, jump in, please. So the third column is going to be your battery utility cost avoidance, your battery energy storage. And that as well also takes into the 6% escalation rate over the last 23 years. There's also a degradation of the battery of 3% annually. And that's also taken into consideration.
Does that also account for selling some of the battery power back?
Again, the battery's not producing power, it's storing of what you produce. But you can, if you have excess generation, you are giving that to the grid and they're giving you full credit for it.
The solar, the battery is gonna hold essentially the energy for usage at the district.
And what you may be getting to, we're not playing games. In other words, we're not charging at night from the utility at their low rate and then turning around 8 hours later and selling it back to them at the higher rate. They don't want us to do that, right? They really the utility will want to know how we're operating our battery. And we can't play the system and just, almost round trip to our benefit, right? But if we're generating power and we have a surplus of that power, we can send that to the grid and the grid actually is treated like an infinite battery. And they'll give us credit for every kilowatt hour we send over to them.
And that export rate we were grandfathered in at that export rate, which was the solar tariff rate. So that was the NIM 2.0 that we were referring to. So that's the rate that changed, is the export rate.
And that's regulated by some sort of app or system?
Well, so there's a tariff, there's a net metering tariff, and so the utility will be a part of the design, the turning it on, the commissioning, so they'll know and so it's automatic. I mean, electrons will flow where they will, and there's meters. There's like there's a house meter, if you will, the site meter, but also there's a net generating output meter, and we're watching how much we're generating, how much we're using on the site, and how much we're pushing over to the utility. And they are too.
Curiosity in our district. Do we have do we have a single power company we work with, or do we?
SoCal Edison, yes.
Oh, all right.
So one question I have is, I understand the degradation that's taking place. I think you said 5%, right?
It's 0.5% for the solar annually, and it's 3% for the battery. So
Okay, so
a little bit greater on the
I'm
battery.
focused on the solar. The battery to me is very minimal.
Okay.
0.5%. If I'm looking at year over year and I see how you've done that, but yet our increase in utility cost avoidance is increased. Can you help explain that a little bit?
Utility cost escalation. So the rate we're figuring is escalating 6% per year.
6%.
The district budgets 10% per year. And as Nick mentioned, the average over 23 years have been 6%.
Yeah,
Okay. And then, so that we've figured that the rate is escalating at 6% per year. Your production is degrading by 0.5%. The difference is factored into this column, and that's why you see an increase, and it's an increase of less than 6%.
All right. And then Nick, I think you were going to go ahead and go into the other columns.
Yeah, thank you very much. So and I'm glad we're covering all this, and I hope this is helpful, taking a look at each one of the columns. So the incentive grants and rebates, I think I just hit that twice, so I'm going to do this one by memory. So we did not include the IRA here. However, just bear in mind that's already factored into into the cash flow here. Now, there are a number of other incentives and grants and rebates that are coming down at every level, the local level, the state level, not so much the federal level, but at a local and state level that we have a pulse on and that we're going to be taking advantage of. So just a couple weeks ago, Gavin Newsom announced that there would be new funding becoming available for school districts, public sector for EV charging. So as that becomes available, we're going to be working with our partners, King Consulting, to really secure that funding for the district. And then in addition to that, the CPUC also announced that they're refunding what's called the Self-Generating Incentive Program. And so the CPUC is the California Public Utilities Commission. That's a conglomerate of the three main utilities, FCE, FDG, and PG&E. They've announced that it's a revolving fund. They're going to refund the SCHIP. Now, they haven't given us a date, so we don't know when that's going to happen. But if that happens during the implementation of this project, it's specifically for battery, you can bet we're going to go try to get those dollars for you guys as well. So, there is plenty of funding coming from the local or the utility level, as well as from the state for all these measures. So just bear that in mind that there's dollars available that are coming down the pipeline that we haven't even seen yet. So that pretty much summarizes it. I clicked it twice, so I lost it. But moving on to the EV charging, I've kind of repeated this one a few times. So you're gonna have 2 dual ports at each site, meaning you're gonna have 4 chargers for 4 spaces, totaling a total of 20 EV spaces. We are gonna have additional EV capable places. So the new DSA code says that for every 26 places, you need to have 1 EV. Now that's only for new parking lots. So you guys are grandfathered in where you are. However, there may come a time when you guys are seeing very good revenues on the EV chargers that you have where it makes sense to install more for the district as a revenue
What is
stream.
the cost of a single unit?
Fully installed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think about between 30 and 50. I mean, I could only give you a range, but set it up about 40,000.
So this is typically a 4-year plus payback, somewhere in there. 3 to 5 year payback.
Again, some of predicting revenue from, I would love to understand how many electric vehicles are in the student body. I suspect it's increasing every year, maybe even every month. We've been very conservative. We're about doing a 12-cent spread, figuring about 30 hours of charging a week, 52 weeks, and that's where it's tracking now. It's not as simple as that because there's, on peak, we want to charge more. We suspect that, we could charge more during school years. Some of it is, there's a policy discussion, much like air conditionings and coffee machines in classrooms that the district will have to, talk about, and we hope we could be a part of and provide some guidance about how to set the rates. Are the parking lots open 24/7? Are you encouraging people that's not associated with the district to camp out at a charger? Is there going to be idle fees that you charge? In other words, if the car is done charging and the owner doesn't come out and move the car, it might be a little challenging if you're a student and you're in a class. Are you going to be able to, oh, excuse me, can I leave class to move my car because otherwise I'll get $5 an hour idle charges. So there's some policy discussion. EV charging is a reality. There's money behind it. There's code requiring it. And we're really, on the forefront of this, and we're putting in 2 dual ports per site with future. And so we suspect that it'll take off and you'll be able to, install more and see that revenue increase.
So what's the assumptions about utilization that you've made to calculate these values?
Yeah, 30 hours at full for 30 hours per week.
Per week?
Yeah.
So most districts are not keeping the facilities open after dark because they don't want community and people coming into the facilities, and so, so we assume 30 hours.
If someone tried to use it after hours, they wouldn't would work?
Well, yeah, exactly. So in the dashboard, you could set availability hours, so only between, 7 to 7, let's say. And then anything outside of that, it would go dark.
Who typically manages the dashboard?
Yeah, so we would definitely want to manage that for the district. It's included in our operation and maintenance numbers. And again, we would report out monthly. And we would track the utility rate. Now, again, we're tracking the utility rate for the battery usage and making sure that we're discharging when we should. It's a very easy effort to track it for EV charging as well.
And the district would have access to that dashboard at all times, so it interfaces with the district.
It gets a little better than that. So now you're generating your own power, you are storing your own power, and now you're selling. And then now you're essentially selling it through these EV chargers. So there's an opportunity to, store the power that you got for free and discharge it into the campus when someone's charging their vehicle.
Well, free is a relative.
I know, hence the air quotes. It's not. Exactly. You caught the air quotes.
I want to be mindful, it's 4:56, we still also want to go 10,
Yeah.
we got a closed session at 5:30.
Okay,
So you can go through the next few columns here.
Yeah,
sure.
It's probably more work to us than it is to them, so.
okay, so the maintenance service, this is gonna be the cost this is baked into the project cost. This is cost to operate and maintain the solar and the battery equipment. That first 5 years is included in the financing. And also can be used to count towards your Inflation Reduction Act rebate. Moving on to the next column, that'll be your energy management services. That's the dashboard as well as the utility analysis. And so that is also included. The first 5 years is included in with the financing and also can count towards the IRA as well.
Is there a cost after?
There,
Energy management services, is there a cost after?
Good question. Yeah, so the district will have the option to renew that contract. Should they say, and it really is up to you. Most districts would. The program essentially pays for itself and it covers more than just electricity. So it's gonna monitor water and sewage
You got
and
a rough idea of
gas.
the cost though?
So
I don't see the number.
we do, it's inclusive in the project and the expectation is that we are gonna be the ones managing that, so it's baked in.
not for years, not for the subsequent years.
So we'll see where we are, in year 5, but generally these projects more than pay for themselves. But it's a very successful program, so,
Yeah.
and you can determine at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's about $30,000.
30,000 annually?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what we hope to show you is in the next 5 years that this energy management service will identify savings beyond the solar and battery through, understanding how the various schools operate, suggestions to the energy management system or the air conditioning controller as it pertains to, making sure things are shut off when it should, making sure that set points are, we understand that some teachers or unions have certain set points. We want to respect that, but also under unoccupied times, are we backing off those set points and saving power by less operation? And that's the savings that we'll find in the next 5 years above and beyond the solar and battery savings.
Okay. And then on the maintenance, the $1 million hit, that one,
Yeah.
that's a replacement battery.
Exactly. So what we've tried to do is, be very honest with what it costs. We recognize that the solar and batteries are new assets for the district. We're trying to account for those costs in subsequent years.
So it's labor as well as.
It is labors. Now, again, no crystal ball. These are today's values for those batteries, including today's labor. Now, labor is going to go up, but the battery costs of the batteries themselves will likely go down. The other thing is in 20 years, some of us may be here suggesting to the board that there's a different technology that we might want to replace it with and use that $1 million that we forecasted 20 years ago and replace those batteries with some kind of hydrogen fuel cell.
So does the maintenance include cleaning the solar cells and replacing the cells also?
It does. So there's a tie between the warranty and administering the warranty and understanding. And what we're able to do with the data acquisition system. So we're watching the solar real time as it comes on at the morning and goes on at night. And we'll be able to compare that to essentially this table that shows, hey, we should be, and this will be on a 15-minute, we should be producing this. There's something going on. Let's remotely query the inverters, see if all the inverters are working. If that's the case, then we roll a truck and we identify, well, okay, is there physical damage? Was there a high profile vehicle that hit these structures? Is there just dirt and buildup? So we'll be able to kind of real time continuously monitor the production.
So a hailstorm sort of thing, if there's anything that can happen.
Yes.
Birds can you
Yeah, so some of that would fall again between warranty, the district's insurance, right? Because you'll have an insurance on your property. And so, but we're here to help navigate all of that. But this is not an insurance policy on the equipment. It is the maintenance of that equipment. But if there's weather that causes that,
Or act of God, hurricane, or tornado.
yeah.
So I think column number 9 here is gonna be kind of into.
Depends, correct,
So the
yeah.
question I have here, and it goes to the really, Joanne brought stuff earlier, the annual finance payment was the assumption you made here?
And well, those numbers were provided by Piper Sandler.
Oh, they were?
Yes, so those are their numbers, so I'll let them speak to that. But the total program savings, as you can see on column 8, is over the 30 years is 51 million. So the total, and the total program savings is all the columns, combined. And then column 9 is gonna be your debt service, is gonna be your payment to the lessor. And those are the numbers which we have worked with Piper Sandler to come up with. And then obviously your net savings is gonna just be column 8 minus column 9. And so that's gonna be your annual savings to the district. And these will be the actual numbers. We'll guarantee the 90% with the O&M included.
Right. Yeah, let's go to Tim.
Okay. Let's take it away, Tim.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. Could you remove that blue stripe there on the screen? Whoever's got that, Jonathan. Whoops.
One more.
Can we remove that? Whoops.
You can back up.
Okay, we're gonna back up. Yeah. Whoops.
So I'm sorry, it's the sensitivity of the remote, so.
Right. There we go. Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Tim Carty here, your financial advisor. So the way I would look at, column 9, the financing, is really the byproduct of everything leading to column 8. We obviously don't have the expertise, so we have to rely on SiteLogic for the validity of everything leading up to column 8. So we take column 8 and we take what SiteLogic gives us as the cost of the program. And then we try to see if we can, and obviously this is an estimate, but it's a pretty good estimate in terms of where things are today. Would we be able to finance the cost of the solar project in a way that at the minimum, column 8 is greater than column 9, and then hopefully more so you achieve what's in column 10 in terms of the savings. So there are lenders who will provide financing, 20-year term, fixed interest rate, using the solar panels in a sense as their own collateral. So what we do, since you heard SiteLogic say they're increasing certain savings by 6%, we try to take column 9 and tailor it to sort of fit with column 8. column 8 increases. So we have column 9 increase. We wouldn't want column 9 to be a flat level payment so that you lose money in the early years. So we try to tailor column 9 around column 8. We also want to make it so that you don't owe a payment on the financing until these solar panels are in service and you start generating benefits. So we have to fund some, in a sense, construction period interest. So for example, I think there was a number like 14.4 million or something that's the program cost. So the amount of money we would borrow will need to be greater than that, whatever it is, because we'll have to fund up front, in a sense, out of the loan, the early construction period interest. But the way the financing works is once you, the board, decide we want to do the solar project, we want to do it with SiteLogic, we're accepting of all of these numbers. Once you decide that, then what we do is we solicit bids from those lenders who we know from experience will finance solar projects. And we select the most attractive bid. And then Blake would sign a term sheet with the lender that locks in the interest rate for the probably, 60 days or so that it will take to close on it. Because there's, similarly to the general obligation bond, which we just completed, there will be financing documents drafted by our legal counsel, David Kasnoki, David, that will then later come to the board for your approval. So I think, once you, the board, in a sense, sign off on and are comfortable with everything leading up to column 8, then we tailor the financing to fit column 8. I would say that column 9 today is a pretty good estimate of what we would get if we were, ready to lock down interest rates today. And even if it fluctuates a little bit, you obviously have some wiggle room, which is the column 10. So again, I think the financing is really step 2. The way I'm viewing it, step 1 being based on everything you've heard today and, whatever time you need to take to think about it, that you decide you're committed to do the solar project. And then my job and Jin's job, working with Blake and Jason, is to, make the financing work. Now, one of the assumptions in here is that you receive that $3.9 million in Inflation Reduction Act rebates. We've assumed you receive that based on what we've been told by SiteLogic. And the way we've applied that is as a buy down of the financing. So if either we don't get the 3.9 million or we get it, but you decide to do something else with it, then obviously that column 9, those numbers would be higher. So again, no decisions are being made, but what we did just to get something into the pro forma for you to consider, we did assume you get the 3.9, and B, we use it as a buy down of the loan. And we would specify that with the whatever lender we work with. So happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Or be helpful in any way that I can, but really, the nuts and bolts of it are, we took column 8 as just something given to us, and then we work column 9 to fit column 8.
So Tim, just along the lines of what you were just discussing, if I look at column 9 is basically the payments that we make over a 20-year period on a $14.8 million project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that includes, you're taking into account already the $3.9 million.
Exactly, as a one-time buy down. So let's just say, for example, I'm going to make up a number, that we borrow, say, $15.5 million. That's to fund the cost, fund construction period interest. We're then really assuming you're paying back, in my example, $11.6 million, which is the 15.5 minus the 3.9. So if we didn't get the 3.9, or if you got it and used it for something else, that column 9 would be larger.
What interest rate did you assume on the financing?
Yeah, we assumed 4.2%. And I would say within a fairly narrow bandwidth, that's a pretty good, approximation. I'd say in the last month, there's probably been days when that rate would be closer to 4%. And there've been days when it's probably been closer to 4.5%. We won't know until we actually get bids from lenders and review them. But for what you see here, 4.2% is the rate we've used.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Neil, and nice to see you or hear you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Nice to see everybody.
I get the idea of column 9 where we're not having any out of pocket because you're graduating the payments. How do you structure the loan to do that? I'm not understanding how you can do that with a completely.
Yeah, no, that's a great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's not like, say, a fixed rate mortgage where your monthly payment is the same every month, and some is principal and some is interest, and over time the principal gets larger, the interest gets lower. Basically, we principal is increasing over time. So we take column 8 and we, in a sense, wrap column 9 around it. If column 8 is increasing at 4 or 5% per year, we grow column 9 at the same rate, and it's the principal component starts lower and gradually ramps up over time. So there's a way to do that and make the math work. And at some point we would show you the backup for column 9 when we had a lender, where you'd see the principal and you'd see the interest and then you'd see the total. For the simplicity for today, we're just showing the total.
So do these loans come with a prepayment penalty, or you can pay it off at any time?
Well, what we would do is we would try to carve out the 3.9 million to be prepaid without penalty. Just a straight, we feel like prepaying it, yeah, there normally would be a prepayment penalty, but if the 3.9 million is highly likely, based on what SiteLogic tells us, and we're pretty certain we're going to use that to prepay, we could get the lender to waive the penalty for that, because that's a specified amount, is normally how we would do it.
A lot of loans will sort of scale the prepayment penalty for the life of the loan, so that if you do it early, the you pay a lot, and as the loan ages, eventually the prepayment penalty goes away.
Yep, 100%. Sometimes we, in the first 5 years, it's 3%, dropping to 2%, dropping to 1%. Yeah, and all that is, we'll solicit bids. There will be a few lenders, I think, who will put bids on the table when we're ready. And that might be an interesting comparison. We might have a lender with a little higher interest rate, but more favorable prepayment terms. And we might select that lender. So we'll ask them to put their, those are all the things we'll ask them. Interest rate, how long will they lock the interest rate for? What are your prepayment terms? Are there any points? Who do you use as your counsel? Is there any cost for counsel? So we'll set out a handful of things that we want to know, and then we'll, as a group, evaluate them for you.
And Tim, it's fine if it is, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. Is it effectively negatively amortizing in the beginning?
It's not negatively amortized. So it's not as though, it's a reverse mortgage or something. It's basically very little principal in the early years, mainly interest, and then the principal is what ramps up. So it's not a negative amortization.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Tim, this is Roger.
Oh,
Question for you, if the district for whatever reason did not receive the grant, the 3.9 million, what year would the payback move out to?
Well, we actually gave SiteLogic that schedule. I don't know if they have it. But essentially, everything you see, and maybe Jen has that and could just tell us, but Jen, do you have handy, and I'm putting you on the spot, by what, is there an approximate amount by which each year beginning in 25, 26 would be larger if we didn't get the 3.9, Jen?
Sure, yes. So the term of the loan would stay the same, but the amount of payment every year will go up. And the dollar amount that it will go up by is roughly the same as the figures that you see in column 10. So without that $3.9 million in IRA rebate, the district effectively would break even for the first 20 years.
There you go. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so the term can't extend because really great point by Jen, all the lenders, the maximum they'll go out for solar is 20 years. So that's a good point. If we did not get the 3.9 million, it's basically a break even for you in the first 20 years. You get the column 10 benefits in this example, assuming you get that 3.9.
And so my next question would be that if we didn't get the 3.9, then the outlook would be a break even in 20 years. In terms of the agreements from that the district would enter with SiteLogic, are there, I don't know, who's reviewed the contracts? Are there performance guarantees in terms of the panels? And also if there's a panel that breaks down and doesn't actually achieve the savings, who pays for that?
So there's a few questions there and let's come back to those, but quickly, one thing I want to point out is this is an IRS tax code. So you're going to be getting the Inflation Reduction Act. So to consider, I don't think it makes sense to consider it as a worst case scenario that you're not going to receive it because you are going to receive it. So that was my first thought. Is in terms of the production. So we essentially guarantee 90% of the utility production. So we're not just going to install this and walk away. We're going to be with you guys for at least the next 5 years in terms of the operations and maintenance, measurement, and the measurement and verification of this equipment. So we would be responsible for that, and our guarantee on our contract would be up to 90% of that utility savings, cost avoidance. You have anything to add to that?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay.
And the other thing is the contracts haven't been populated, they haven't been shared, they haven't been reviewed. That's one of the next steps. Should this program look attractive to the board, we'll ready contracts, we'll get them into review and we'll go from there.
So we're not at that stage yet to look at the actual physical contracts.
We can be very quickly. So we just need essentially a green light to put that together. We want to make sure that the board was comfortable and you are completely educated on the program. And we can determine, if you guys can determine to move forward, you can have that conversation with Noemi, and we're ready to put contracts together. This project is buttoned up.
What if we didn't, Joanne, what if we didn't want to finance this project, we just wanted to pay cash out of bond money? Is that something we can do?
Some districts do that. I think we would, we'd have to go, first of all, I think that the ballot language, the 75 words and the project list are broad enough that we'll double check with David Kasnoka, but I think the 75 words in the project list are broad enough that we could pay for this from out of bond funds.
You can. It's absolutely included in the bond language. I checked.
Yeah.
My only caution would be, certainly you can pay for it out of the bond, but it would have to be a much later series because series 1 has been pretty much allocated for all of our series 8 projects.
25% of the allocation.
Well,
Yeah, and
$4 million for the system. You would be purchasing $14.4 million.
There's a cap.
14.8.
We would have a cap.
Okay.
Right.
We have a cap.
Because you would have to prioritize this project over your series 8 projects that we have been discussing.
I think to Joanne's point, it would be interesting to see various pro formas on what that would mean with very, not necessarily paying for all of it.
Right.
But you put a couple million into it, what does that do to this, et cetera? So I think that would be interesting, that we don't need for this moment, but
No.
Tim, I think we'd be interested.
Yeah, just to look at the opportunity cost of how we finance it. Mhm.
The, back to the IRA really quick, even though it's in code and guarantee, there's timelines. So there is a risk that if we take too long reviewing different options, that if and when administration changes, then that may potentially, it's highly likely that it'll go away with the new administration.
And along those lines, I had a question, again, in Site Logic, you would be installing this, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, along those lines, right now, would the goal be to complete everything by summer of next year? Is that?
What is your time?
Yeah, so we put together a project schedule. We'll be able to show it at the next board meeting, at the next meeting. Actually, the district, Noemi specifically is
With
reviewing it
Lake.
and with Lake is they provided us, when can we move on to what site at what time? We have everything completed and going through final checkout commissioning in September of 2024, and that'll leave a quarter to get it all turned on in advance of, really, we suspect it'll be the day after January 21st of 2025 that it would be at risk of being executive ordered out of code.
We looked to it, when we looked at the scheduling of the projects, I mean, we'll have to relook at that again too, as we really put it, kind of pinned it on the schedule, but wanting to look at what sites may have alternative parking for a short period of time, what sites we may actually have to section off the parking lot, move it, move parking or basically block parking in certain areas and then move it. So we wanted to look at that. So we have a pretty rough plan as to how we could do that in a succession of sites. But there's still some work to be done on that.
Example, if you can't get the solar cells that we need in the time frame that our schedule shows, do you cover, and the January 21st, the executive order says, too bad, no more, what's it called, IRA? So who eats that?
Lead times are accounted for in the schedule. That's actually what was one of my first questions to them. What are our lead times? We obviously, the steel, the beams, the switchgear, the panel boards. So we have an estimate of when, basically the lead on those items and how quickly we would have to start releasing some of those early contracts for procurement. So those are all things that I've already started questioning and started looking into, so that we'll have everything by the time we actually need them on site.
Yeah, I will say that is part of the urgency of going to contract sooner rather than later, as in the next board meeting, is so that we have that time for the design, the engineering, and to place the material orders. You mentioned the solar, that's really not a long lead item, it's the energy components, so that are really the longer lead items. But we're comfortable, provided we are going to contract rather soon.
The panels manufactured here.
Yeah, that was a question brought up. The reality is we have to look out on the market. It is tier 1 panels. There are North American made panels available. They're sometimes at a premium and they may have limited supply. So we really look across the market. We haven't settled on one panel manufacturer yet, but we definitely can procure those if it makes sense, both on timeline as well as a price point.
Would they all come from the same manufacturer?
They would, even the batteries, we're striving for consistency. We see that when we do our lighting projects, is to have consistent, so that when we stock spare modules in case there's a failure, softball strike, which these aren't near the softball fields, but or what have you, we can quickly unplug one and plug one back in from stock we would have.
Jonathan, I see the life cycle of the batteries is 20 years. What's the life cycle or duration of the actual panels? Is it 30 years basically?
Yeah, we're figuring 30 years and 0.5 and degrading 0.5 per year.
Right, okay, all right, thank you.
Since theoretically, we're going to need to make this decision in 2 weeks, at our next board meeting. And I know you don't have the official schedule, but if it's ending September 2024 and everything's checked the box, what would be the financing time? We'd sign it. How long for financing? Did you make that choice? Then when do we start to?
Yeah, I'll defer to Tim on that one.
I mean,
Yeah.
To give us a sense, I don't want to wake up in 2 weeks and now we have all tons more questions and we're not able to do this. You got to give us something here.
Sure.
Right. If you look at this particular schedule, the SiteLogic folks put together, if it laid out this way, meaning, let's say at this August 17th board meeting, you decided, we're approving the contract with SiteLogic, we've gotten all our questions answered, we're going to do it, then we would, maybe at this September 28th meeting, I mean, it might roll by a month, but we would, either at a September meeting or at an October meeting, have then have the lender identified and the financing documents available for you to approve. So really what triggers us soliciting the potential lenders is whether it's August 17th or at whatever date, final approval by the board of the contract that you're going to do it. One of the things that in Los Angeles County, 30 days before your board acts on the financing documents, we do have to provide a package to the Los Angeles County Office of Education. There's an online form with attachments. We'll help your staff do that. So I think really for the financing, from the date you decide firmly you want to do it, we could probably, close on the financing, I'd say, 2 to 3 months thereafter. So November 1st might be a little ambitious, but, maybe by the end of November at the latest.
Tim, this is Neil again. The 4.2% is just mind blowing to me. You blew us away last time with 2+% on financing the bond in a 5% market or 4+5% market.
Right.
That's below prime rate. How is that even possible?
That's just rates yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you account for the 25 basis points increase yesterday? It's just, and I know you're a miracle worker, but this seems miraculous to me. And
well,
it also seems like
that's a great question.
It's difficult for me to be able to say, yes, let's do this without knowing the actual cost of the financing, because that's massively impactful here.
Right. So the interest rate on this will be higher than, for example, the interest rate we had on those refi bonds. Why is that? Because a general obligation bond is more secure than a tax-exempt lease. But in terms of why is the interest rate here lower than, say, the prime rate, remember, this is a tax-free lease. So the lender does not include the interest income on either federal or state income tax return. So it's 4.2% pre-tax.
So he's getting a better return in effective terms.
Effective terms, it's higher than that. Now these lenders would pay a corporate tax rate, but it's probably something like 6% after tax. So it's still an attractive rate. I know it is a little bit of a cart and the horse type of thing that and I could see it as a board member. I don't want to commit to this without knowing what the financing is, but we can't really get a firm bid from lenders until they know you're committed to do the solar project. But when we say that 4.2%, a lot of that already had that Federal Reserve quarter point rise in interest rates baked into the cake. Everyone knew that was coming. So, again, even if it were a little bit higher, say we're 4.5%, as long as you get that 3.9 million, you're still, well ahead of the game. That column 10 on the pro forma is still very attractive. And we'll hustle. I mean, we'll jump on it as soon as obviously you've satisfied yourselves and asked all the questions you have to ask on the solar piece, seen the contract from SiteLogic and approved it.
I have a question.
Thank you, Tim.
Because I know we're about to.
Well, I gotta go to closed sessions.
So I think, I really appreciate this timeline. I think we have an exciting project, something that we looked at doing many, many times, and it hasn't penciled out. It hasn't worked out before, so this is actually very promising, and I think it has a lot of potential. I think there are a couple of other items that we need to add in terms of activities here to this review, meaning that 4 of the 5 sites that we're looking at, Wiseman Unified, like as in our district, pays the full electric bill. However, here for the site that's designated as District Office Da Vinci purchases the electricity directly from Southern California Edison and pays those bills. So I think we need to sunshine this and have a further deeper conversation with our counterparts at Da Vinci, because they're going to be paying that portion of the electric bill. So there has to be an agreement of some sorts developed between Wiseburn and Da Vinci, because it won't be directly now with Da Vinci and Southern California Edison. So Vicente, I'm really glad you're here today, because this is exciting. This is exciting in terms of the potential savings. I do like the project and the things that I've heard. I just know that we have a couple other items that we want to make sure that as we're getting the information, we're also relaying that as well to yourselves and our counterparts at Da Vinci. I know we have a board meet, a 2x2 meeting is August 24th. However, based on this time, I really can't wait to do it that long. I would like to touch base with maybe Joe Weber, Ray Santiago separately, so that maybe Nelson, you and I can at least sunshine this if the board is in agreement to have at least have a conversation with and share this information, what we know now with Da Vinci.
Well, there should be some sharing on the loan cost too. Right?
Depends on the agreement.
Depends on the agreement.
Well, I'm just saying, we shouldn't foot the bill for the loan.
Right, it
If
could be-
with the benefits will be spread, so should the cost.
Right.
And I think that's what we need to have that conversation, because if there's a shared cost, there should be as well a shared benefit.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you to SiteLogic and Tim, also thank you. I know you're online as well. I want to thank you for the wonderful presentation. We have another meeting that we have to, we have 2 more meetings actually. Yeah. So we have a closed session meeting and then
So are they going to
open
the
board
next
meeting.
board
So
meeting?
Tim and Jim, thank you very much. This is very helpful, and I guess we'll be back in 2 weeks.
I just want to say one thing, it's been great working with Piper Sandler, and they've been extremely instrumental and valuable on this development. So thank you, Tim and team, and we're looking forward to seeing you hopefully at the next one. Absolutely, thank you all.
Sure, our pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the night. Bye-bye.